Lady in the middle. There you go. So, Sophie is an expert working for Business France, project manager. And the interesting part about her is that she was already writing about circular economy in her academic years. So she was a little bit ahead of her time. And we have Jyri. He's part of a think tank. And you always wonder, what does a think tank do? So there we see one. So we're going to probe them a little bit on the key things that are happening in circular economy. So thanks for joining me in this panel. So maybe a little bit obvious question, but why do we need to change our economies and societies in this circular thing? And maybe, Sophie, you can still tell a few things about what you do as project manager in Business France. So I start with you.
So to answer your question about why do we need to change toward a circular economy, obviously there is a limited amount of resources, and we all know that we have to move toward it. And that's why with Business France we're thrilled that this year, for the first time, we are going to address this topic, and we are going to organize a bunch of event programs abroad, and especially a big one that we are organizing in partnership with Business Finland in Finland, and we're going to help some French companies to accelerate their development and test their products and match make with partners in Finland. So that's some of the activities we do in circular economy.
So great, but and then why is this, why do we need to change now? Is there something that is more prevalent than previous from your viewpoint?
So from my viewpoint is that in the past we've addressed the topic on the waste aspect, and we have very little. We've not focused on the beginning of the value chain or the beginning of the life cycle of the products, and now we realize that we have to focus more on bringing solutions in France and internationally on the eco-designing of the product and on the beginning of the making of the product, and so that's why we're trying on focusing on that.
Yeah. Great. So Jyri, you would like to comment on that? You're part of Sitra, there's a think tank. Can you first explain a little bit what you do at with Sitra, and as a consultant and advising the government as well, I understand. So tell me a little bit what you do at Sitra, and then try to give us also your insight on why do we need to change our economies.
Okay. Sitra is an innovation fund. So eventually it was about, and it has been about to make a change. What will the future will look like? So we are foresighting that always, that what are the biggest megatrends. And some years ago, 2000, beginning of 2000, we saw that bioeconomic, clean tech, and above all, the climate mitigation and circularity, to changing the way we used to think about economics and businesses have to change. And so we are fortunate to, we got some money from Bank of Finland in 1967 a little bit, but then we have wisely invested that, so it's a huge amount of money, but it's endowment capital of 860 million. And we live on the revenue of that, so we don't touch the capital, but then we can invest to the sustainable funds, which has a proven track record on ESG, meaning environmental and social governance. And that's one part. And the one part is changing our society, the nation. And as you heard our minister, it's a proven proof of concept, the way he was talking about circularity and that we have to change. And that's also something that we try to stress to the our government and public sector as well, that we have to have certain long-term strategies beyond the usual 4 years governmental programs. And that has taken place. It's the sustainability. And you all know we have to change. Who is against the change? We see the urgency everywhere, and 2013, I'm always using the slide of the cover of Economist the last page of each year you can see the cover of the Economist magazine, and it's telling you the state of the world. And the headline was "Road to Hell." And actually I thought that that world cannot go worse, but we've seen that it can. So I think that we are in urgent to change.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have this sort of plastic either, the bubble we are in. So that's the word next time. Maybe it's a bio-based, but that's something that we should change. So look for the small things. I'm also saying when we are working with companies that start with stupidities. Take the stupidities away, which you know. Turn off the lights, don't have the air conditioning in the meeting room if you don't use it, take the stairs instead of elevator, buy goods that you don't throw into the landfill. If you buy from the crazy Friday, Black Friday things, there's a shortcut to the landfill. So stupidity is a way to start to make wise things, things that last 20 years old Gucci boots. They have the third life now, but I think that I soon have to leave them. So
let's not talk.
I can talk like 1 hour, but
Yeah, but before we get into these shoes and your not your socks, I don't want to talk about your socks. But you don't talk about circularity, and you're saying, and I think it's important. You need to work on small experiments to make things count, right? But why would you do that from a business perspective, right? Do you have a good case? Do you say sort of, hey, I'm going to invest my time, and we're going to put subsidies and grants to it? Why is that a good situation? Because we need to persuade also the decision makers in the companies to attribute their time and energy and their resources to this. So why is that a good case from you as specialist in the circular economy? In terms of the drivers there as well.
So in terms of drivers, I think the main one would be the regulatory framework, because we've seen an example in France of that. A couple years ago, it has been forbidden for grocery stores to throw away food that were unsold food. So from that law, a lot of opportunities have been created. The market has been created for the logistic to what do we do with this food? Like we have to give it to some nonprofits, and so there is nothing in between, and so you created a market for the logistics for it. So that's the law driving the market. That's the first thing, and then I think that the demand, so the consumers, by being very responsible for their consumption, they are pushing the offer, so the companies to create better products. So that's big drivers, and obviously I would say the limit of resources is driving the companies to rethink the way they make products and to rethink the way they envision the future, to take into account.
Yeah. Jyri?
First of all, usually it's about risk mitigation very much, and then about savings of material, being more efficient, and so it's many times you get better revenue, you get EBIT. But now also it starts to be also growth potential, and for example in car industry in the future will be about car sharing instead of selling cars. And if you think about that as a business, instead of one sales of a car, you can have daily with that one car many transactions. What does it mean to you? A lot of money. So it's also very beneficial to concentrate already on the products that are there on the market and make the most out of them, use the old capacity which is not usually used. So I think that, for example, in manufacturing industry, that's the trend. Not just concentrating on the new stuff which going to bring in the market, but concentrate on those that are existing and the outcomes that you bring to your customer. And very much the driver number one there is sustainability, but the other one is technology and digitalization, because it gives you the possibility of tracking and measuring whatever you produce, and then you can also have predictive maintenance and optimization. So also it means that usually the emissions go much lower.
Yeah.
So the life cycles are very much longer.
Yeah, so this is interesting because you're coming from different angles a little bit. You say one part is the digitalization enables you to get faster into new offerings, new service operations, better connection with your clients. On the other part, you're also saying sort of regulatory framework is super important for governments, and because people need to have a predictable outcome. which goes beyond this 4-year cycle of politics or 3-year cycle or 2-year, depending on which country you live. But there is obviously those things are important. Could you give maybe an example in your own country or in your business area where you see sort of, hey, this I really see as an important example for the audience to share?
That has been already realized, or that could be an approach for the future?
That you're working on, or Jyri can go first, and then you have some more time.
Okay, about examples for country, we had made first, we made the sort of study of the opportunities in 2014, what is this for our industries and what are the potentials, and then we did the roadmap for Finland, how we change our whole society and engage public sector, schools, decision makers, businesses and consumers. And there are a huge number of examples. Biggest one is maybe the Neste, which is our biggest fuel producer actually, and the best business for them is renewable fuel based on the food waste. And it's very, you know, the demand for that is a straight line up. And here we have companies who have, for example, in forest industry, they have new innovative materials. So the revolution of materials is now coming. Instead of burning food chips, you can make, you know, furnitures for the ceramics, for the...
So you're meaning that some of the byproducts in industrial sort of production can be used for different applications?
Upcycle actually the side stream into very valuable goods and materials and liquids. So, and chemical industry has changed a lot and using bio-based materials. But also we have what I mentioned earlier, like you can have we have a company called Turbo, which is kind of my favorite because it's still SME. And in compressor, usually you have to have oil inside. And when you have oil inside, you have to have maintenance people all the time. They don't have oil and at all. They have magnets inside, and they can bring it to your site and operate remotely. That from their premises in Finland. So once they own and operate that for you, first of all, the energy consumption is very low, and you only optimize, you only use the air. So you can pay me fee or to them a fee per month. Because
so you're changing the business model there.
Totally.
And it's also important to recognize that the business model change can drive, new ways of circular economy. I just want to also go to Sophie on to see sort of example you would like probably to share, or the direction that you are going in France with.
So the example I mentioned earlier with the food waste law, we've seen some new companies on the market like Phoenix or Commerso who are organizing the distribution of this unsold food. And we are going to see the same kind of opportunities or real opportunities with the new law that has just been voted yesterday actually in France. And there is over 100 measures that have been put in the law yesterday for circular economy. And among these measures, I can cite one that will create opportunities in market is the one that involves the creation of new extended producer responsibility schemes, which is very special to France. We have already a lot, but we're creating new ones, and one, for example, in the construction industry. And the construction industry will have to go from a demolition industry to a deconstruction industry to be able to reuse the materials. So we'll see like the construction site managers will be liable to use reusable materials in the buildings that they make. So in the future, we'll have a new market of reused materials in place. And same as for the food waste, the regulatory framework will help these opportunities too.
Yeah, so you will see probably also new initiative emerging out of this regulatory, and the producer compliancy will, if you obviously create new business models in that space as well. Thank you for sharing that. And so obviously we are also a conference that wants to change now. So we need to get also into the action, right? So your last thoughts to share with the audience. What can we do better tomorrow to make that change happen? So what would you advise if you would be in one of the boards to sort of, hey, let's go for that one? Maybe the think tank. You have probably tons of ideas, but you should limit yourself to one or two to leave. Yes.
I think that first of all, everybody could make a sort of plan for themselves and make an assessment. You can do that actually on our site. How much I produce CO2 daily, and what can I do in my own life to make that better. And I think that France should start with giving value to the bottles first, that you could have a recycling process there. That would be number one.
Thanks, thanks, Jyri, for sharing that.
My thought about what we could do to change now is that everybody should have in mind and constantly think, how can I do to produce no waste? Because the circular economy is also about it's about limiting waste and efficiently use and manage the use of resources, but it's also about thinking how can we produce the less waste as possible, and having always in all the decisions we make this idea of how can I reduce close to zero the waste I'm producing.
Okay. And if we do that all together, then it is also that the companies are being forced to address that with new products and services. Otherwise, you go to somebody else that's doing that, right? Thank you so much for sharing these very insightful, expert opinions and from different parts of Europe. So thank you very much
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
for participating.